Discover China. In a land besieged with internal turmoil and international peril, countless greedy eyes regarded the decaying imperial power of the Qing Dynasty with anticipation, planning elaborate plots, using any means necessary. Who robbed the treasures of the Forbidden City in those troubled times? Discover China tracks down the stolen treasures of the Imperial City. The Xinhai Revolution put over 2,000 years of Chinese feudal monarchy on the verge of collapse. On February 12, 1912, after the last imperial meeting in the Hall of Mental Cultivation, Empress Long Yu, along with then 6-year-old Emperor Puyi, then dubbed Emperor Xuantong, issued an imperial edict announcing Puyi's abdication of the throne. After much deliberation, the northern warlord government of Beiyang allowed the abdicated Emperor Puyi and his imperial court to remain in the Forbidden City, where they lived for another 13 years. During this period, a mass of national treasures flowed out of the Forbidden City, resulting in massive, irreparable losses. Who stole these treasures? How did they manage to carry them out of the heavily guarded Imperial City? In 1922, Prince Pujie, Puyi's younger brother, walked hurriedly through the gates and out of the Forbidden City. The gate guards paid no special attention to him since he was a frequent visitor to the Forbidden City. However, this time, Pujie was carrying a precious painting with him. The painting was of a riverside scene at Qingming Festival. Ever since Pujie took this legendary painting, it has been drifting around the four corners of the world. The painting is a representative work of artist Zheng Ziduan, a painter of the Qing Dynasty. His fine brushwork was captured in the architecture and daily life of the people living along the Bian River. The painting vividly portrayed more than 500 characters in various attire and facial expressions. The painting revealed the lives of people from all walks of society, both rich and poor, as well as the different economic activities of the rural areas and the city. The composition of the painting was rhythmically organized, like a poem. With masterful brushstrokes and layout skills, the painting was an immediate sensation. Since the Qing Dynasty, this painting has been revered by collectors. This explains why, even through periods of war, it has been so well preserved. According to Pujie, the painting was a gift from his brother Puyi. But why had Puyi bestowed this treasure on him? More strangely, it is recorded that in 1922 alone, Puyi bestowed upon Pujie over 1,200 items of precious calligraphy and painting. Was Puyi really that generous, or is there another explanation? After his abdication, the last emperor, Puyi, was allowed to remain in the Forbidden City. The former royal family still kept the complete imperial court, with hundreds of officials and thousands of eunuchs and maids. As a result of its excessive spending, the imperial family found itself in terrible financial problems despite a subsidy from the Republic's government. As political turmoil in China grew, Puyi realized that it wouldn't be long before he would have to leave the palace. What then? Could he live on after his expulsion? Would he be able to survive as a commoner? Puyi gazed upon the rare treasures in his palace. The problem was this: how would he get all of these treasures out? Puyi was no longer a powerful emperor, his legal powers now relinquished. Puyi and his brother Pu Jie came up with a plan. As a donation, Puyi bestowed the treasures on Pu Jie. For the sake of convenience, they chose to move the precious calligraphy scrolls and priceless paintings. Things seemed to go smoothly. The brothers secretly carried the calligraphy and paintings out of the palace, either wrapped in yellow silk or in book bags. No one seemed to notice. After successfully smuggling out a few items, the brothers' confidence grew. Records suggest Pu Jie stole 1,285 scrolls and 68 albums of calligraphy and paintings from September to December in 1922. But these are only estimates, and the real figure may be much larger. Over 22 years, these treasures moved around China, going from Beijing, Tianjin, Chengcheng, and many other places. Many items were severely damaged by travel, and some have been lost forever. Puyi realized how easy it was to move the treasure out of the Imperial City, but there came a time when many of the most valuable treasures had already been taken, certainly those that could be carried easily. So he shifted his attention to Jianfu Palace, home to most of the treasures in the whole of the Forbidden City. Puyi recalled an experience from his childhood. He describes it in his autobiography, From Emperor to Citizen. At the age of 16, I had ordered a eunuch to open one of the storerooms of Jianfu Palace out of sheer curiosity. The seals were so thick, it was as if it had not been opened in years. I saw a house full of big boxes piled up to the ceiling. The boxes were sealed in the reign of Emperor Jia Qing, and no one could tell what was inside. I wondered then, how many treasures had I possessed? Jianfu Palace is located in the northwest side of the palace. It had been the residence of crown princes since the Qing Dynasty. Emperor Qianlong of the Qing Dynasty converted it into a garden, giving it its modern name, Qianlong Garden. The architectural style of Jianfu Palace is different from that of other imperial buildings. It is lively and well organized. Much royal treasures had been stored there since the reign of Emperor Qianlong, including numerous antiques, calligraphy, and paintings. Jianfu Palace housed the most important cultural relics in the Forbidden City. After ascending to the throne, Emperor Jia Jing, Emperor Qianlong's son, sealed off the palace to show his filial piety. They were stored there for over a century. At this time, rumors flew in civil circles. Some eunuchs were taking treasures from Jianfu Palace to Liuli Chung in order to sell them. Sir Reginald Fleming Johnston, Puyi's foreign tutor, told him about this and suggested he had an inventory of Jianfu Palace taken. Puyi agreed that this was a good idea. He could pick out the most precious items and transfer them out of the Forbidden City. Puyi could not have foreseen that this course of action was to have catastrophic results. On the eve of June 26, 1923, roaring flames were seen bursting into the sky from the northwest of the Forbidden City. People hurried to see what was happening. They found Jianfu Palace, a giant fire. Firefighters were too late to prevent serious damage. When they reached the spot, Jianfu Palace was a sea of flames. The fire was not put out until the next morning. And it was 3 days before the last embers were finally extinguished. After the fire, the government stated that it was faulty electric wiring in the De Ruixin study that caused the inferno. However, evidence suggests that there may be other reasons for the fire. Jianfu Palace was reduced to cinders just a day after Puyi had decided to take its inventory. Was this a coincidence? Many people believe that the fire was a result of arson, designed to conceal the thievery of the imperial eunuchs. Just how much treasure was stored in Jianfu Palace? After the fire, in accordance with the Imperial Household Department's request, many of Beijing's gold shops bid for the right to dispose of the blackened ruin. An under-the-table deal resulted in the sale of the remains of Jianfu Palace for the sum of 500,000 yuan. The lucky dealer extracted more than 17,000 liang, or 850 kilograms of gold from the charred ruins. The disappointed Puyi was indignant about the fire. He ordered a thorough investigation. Its results were not definitive. Furious, Puyi banished the eunuchs from the Forbidden City. It was the final chapter in the unique history of eunuchs in China. The eunuchs themselves had long understood that they were on their way out. Since the palace was short on money, the eunuchs had not been paid for a long time. They began to look for ways of making a living, concluding that the most effective method was plundering the imperial treasures. Everyone knew about it. It was a wide-open secret. Worried that the entire wealth of the Forbidden City would be lost, Puyi decided to get rid of the eunuchs. But was it they who had set the fire to Jianfu Palace? There's no definitive evidence to confirm this, despite their acknowledged thievery. It is said that many new antique stores appeared in Tiananmen Street after the fire, and that many were owned by the eunuchs. It was rumored that these stores were selling looted treasures from the Forbidden City. The eunuchs stole a great many treasures from the Imperial City, but Puyi didn't acknowledge that it was he who had started this trend. Puyi thought he was smart when he came up with the idea of smuggling out treasure from the Imperial City. But the eunuchs, with their intimate knowledge of the priceless items, were one step ahead of him. The eunuchs and maids knew that their age-old way of life was coming to an end, and so they decided they were not going to leave empty-handed. Around the Forbidden City, rare treasures were coming to light even in the 1980s. These were probably hidden by eunuchs and maids waiting for an opportunity to smuggle them out. It's therefore conceivable that, dreading punishment for their crimes, those eunuchs set fire to Jianfu Palace when they heard that Puyi was about to take its inventory. The eunuchs were banished, but how long could Puyi stay in the Imperial Palace on his own? Everyone knew they would have to leave this magnificent palace sooner or later. They're all trying to find a way out for themselves. The many concubines of Puyi were no exception. Their thefts are a lasting loss of Chinese culture. There are more than 9,000 rooms in the Forbidden City, with many luxurious palaces and cozy pavilions. But the room Emperor Qianlong favored the most was the West Room in the Hall of Mental Cultivation. Barely 6 square meters, in that room Qianlong would read books and enjoy ancient calligraphy and paintings. A Chinese saying goes, "A great mountain is not judged by its height, but by the inspiration it receives from heaven." The small room housed 3 rare treasures Emperor Qianlong admired. These were Clear Sky After Snow, Mid-Autumn Festival, and Letter to Bo Yuan, written by Qing Dynasty calligraphers Wang Shizhi, Wang Shanzi, and Wang Shun. These 3 pieces of calligraphy had been handed down for generations. The West Room was named the Hall of the 3 Rare Treasures. Emperor Qianlong could never have anticipated that these 3 rare treasures would undergo such a tragic comedy 100 years after his death. At the time Puyi was embarking on smuggling the treasures, one of his concubines named Jin secretly moved Mid-Autumn Festival and led her to Bao Yuan to her residence in the Palace of Longevity and Health. She then proceeded to take the treasure out of the Forbidden City in her luggage. The scrolls then drifted to Hong Kong, only to be redeemed later at a large expense by the People's Government in 1951. Today, they are housed in the Palace Museum. Wang Shizhi's Clear Sky After Snow found its way to Taiwan in 1949 and is now housed in the National Palace Museum in Taipei. Those three literary works are of priceless significance in the history of Chinese calligraphy and art, and are essential to the study of Chinese calligraphy. Sadly, it is uncertain if Clear Sky After Snow will ever be returned to the Palace Museum.
看报！看报！看报！看报！冯玉祥把宣统皇帝赶出皇宫了！看报！看报！看报！看报！
The loss of the imperial treasures gradually came to the public's attention on November 15, 1924, by decree of the Provisional Regent Congress. The dethroned Emperor Puyi was expelled from the Imperial City by the army of General Feng Yuxiang. This picture depicts Puyi leaving the palace. Later, the Republican government set up a Royal Household Disposal Committee to make an inventory of cultural relics in the Imperial Palace. According to these records, there were 1.17 million cultural relics in the Forbidden City. Porcelain ranked at the top of the list, followed by calligraphy works and then paintings. Gold, bronze, and jade wares also make up a significant portion. The committee suggested establishing a palace museum at once so that these precious cultural relics could be housed in a public museum, reducing the possibility of these treasures being stolen. In the early fall of 1925, Li Yuying, chairman of the Royal Household Disposal Committee and a director of the Palace Museum, personally wrote the grand sign for the Palace Museum. On October 10, 1925, the Palace Museum was officially established. Its cultural relics had at last found a protective home. After the foundation of the People's Republic of China, the painting Pu Jie smuggled out of the palace riverside scene at Qingming Festival, once housed in the Northeast Museum, was returned to the Palace Museum, finally resting in the familiar arms of the Imperial City. This painting had been tossed around between the court and the public for almost 900 years. It was housed 5 times in the palace and 4 times circulated in public. It is the epitome of the nomadic stories of so many priceless pieces